Welcome to Married to History, where we try to be informative, entertaining, and family friendly.
Aloha, I'm Christopher. I have a fancy piece of paper on my wall that says I know more about history than Shirley does.
It's true. I'm Shirley, and I'm a homeschool mom that relies on good curriculum, Wikipedia, and Christopher to teach our kids history.
And before we get into our episode, let's take a minute to address some small corrections from last time.
It's important to keep in mind that unless stated, I don't warn Christopher about a topic beforehand. It's fun for me to see what he knows right off the top of his head. If you would like to hear a more comprehensive and well-prepared episode on any topic, just let us know. So, honey, what did we learn since last time?
We learned that mixing ammonia and bleach and whatever other chemicals you mentioned is bad. Do not do. Can produce hazardous fumes. Not mustard gas.
Yes, mustard gas. Google said so. It's actually mustard gas.
What, we're trusting Google now?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, fine. Let's see here. What else did we learn? We also learned that, I remembered why I don't know that much about Agent Orange.
Why is that?
Yeah, because when I think about Vietnam and I think about some of the special weapons that were used, napalm comes to mind. Agent Orange did not come to my mind because, as I learned now, or rather I would like to say I reminded myself, it was a herbicide agent. It was not meant to kill people. It was meant to kill the vegetation, the food supplies specifically.
And that's why it was so bad, because it was hurting people.
That's one of the reasons. So not only was it doing its job and killing crops and whatnot, but yes, it also caused later effects on people and even for generations afterwards. And yeah, they didn't realize that was the case at the time.
That's super bad.
Super bad. And let's see, I want to say there was one other thing. Wasn't there something else?
I learned something else. I looked up napalm.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I feel totally stupid because in my mind, I always thought mustard gas, napalm, and Agent Orange, I always put them in the same category together.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew mustard gas was a poison gas. So I'm like, oh, okay, so the other two are poison gases too. So we cleared that up last time. So mustard gas is a poisonous gas. Agent Orange was an herbicide, as you just said. And then napalm, you were right. I mean, I didn't doubt you, but
it was a gelatinous of some sort.
Yeah, it's basically thickened kerosene, from what I understood, from what I read. Like, it's just, it's like something mixed with a fuel to make it thicker, and it burns really hot. Like, it's super bad. Super bad.
Yep.
I also learned, we mentioned Hitler's mustache last time.
Mm-hmm.
I learned it's called a toothbrush mustache.
I still prefer to call it the Hitler stash or the Charlie Chaplin stash.
Me too, but it's a toothbrush stash.
Toothbrush stash. That just sounds stupid.
It does.
Am I allowed to say stupid? Are we going to offend people if I say stupid? I mean, you're billing family friendliness on this.
Yes, we are crediting this as a family friendly podcast, but I think my standard is going to be, would we allow our own children to listen to this?
Yes.
Our youngest is 9.
I have no problem with our children hearing me say the word stupid. I mean, I say it to them all the time.
Yes. Yes, you do. And they appreciate it.
I'm sure they do.
We also do a lot of sarcasm in our family.
No, we don't.
All right, on to the main topic of the episode. Honey, I have a history question for you.
Really? I love those.
I know you do. And actually, this question comes from our son, Quartus. Oh. He wanted to ask, was everyone depressed during the Great Depression?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Is that why it's called the Great Depression?
No. People were depressed, yes. I'm surely some people were happy during the time, or at least mildly pleasant during the time. But by and large, a majority of people were depressed. It was a major economic collapse. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, the most significant, at least in recent history. I mean, to this day, whenever there's any kind of economic downturn or whatnot, or I should rephrase, when there's big economic downsides of some kind, people, the first thing they tend to do is compare it to the Great Depression, saying that, oh, we're not as bad, or oh, this is comparable, or oh, it's just as bad. Anybody who says it's just as bad, I think those people are I think those people are foolish.
Okay.
To put it into a perspective, 2008 is the most recent terrible one that I can think of. The housing crash that
I
people,
remember it.
I believe people call it the Great Recession.
Right.
So if I recall correctly, GDP during the Great Recession dropped like 2%. It might have been as high as 8, but I want to say it really wasn't that big percentage wise.
It was a
wasn't
big
that big of a
deal.
deal. That's a lot of money. I mean, when you're talking about economy based on trillions and trillions of dollars, then yes, 2% is an awful lot of money. That's a big thing. But on a percentage scale, it's not that big of a deal. When we're talking the Great Depression, that was a drop of about 30% in the
Holy
GDP.
cow.
So again, with dollars and cents, probably wasn't as much money back then as the numbers value that we've talked about today. But percentage wise, you can tell
Oh.
Great Depression significantly worse
Right.
than any other economic problems we've had, at least since that time.
Right.
So yeah, we call it the Great Depression, not because of the sadness that people had because they were broke or anything like that. We call it the Great Depression because the economy was depressed.
Okay. So what's the difference between a depression and a recession? Is it just about magnitude?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Recession, to my best of my knowledge, a recession means that okay, yeah, there was a slight think about it like a skiing. A recession is a mild slope. All right, it's not that great, but like rookie skaters can or skiers can get on that and they'll do just fine. A depression, no, you save that for the pros. You don't put a rookie on that because they're not going to survive that trip.
Okay. So for the ignorant, including myself, why did we have a Great Depression?
It's a long story.
Like
Do you have time for it?
Rain clouds blew in. Everyone got seasonal affective disorder. And then it got worse into depression.
Your words hurt me.
Depression hurts people.
Give me strength.
Or was it more like a postpartum depression? Did the world give birth and then have hormone fluctuations?
What?
Postpartum depression.
What?
And that, I don't know.
Where? Must control fist of death. Must control fist of death.
See, okay. I know that's all completely ridiculous, but it's just so fun to make you flabbergasted.
You are the worst.
That's my job.
And you do it so well.
No, but I really want to know. Okay, so like depression for dummies, brief, like why?
Basically irresponsible business practices, which
we've seen that before.
Which are commonplace. Think about it like this. In the 20s, we tend to call them the roaring 20s, the booming 20s.
Super prosperous.
Super prosperous. I mean, the economy was on a swift rise. People had money and they wanted to spend it. Their wanting to spend money led to increases in business and new businesses and new hires for those businesses to support those customers.
Sounds great.
That led to greater profits to afford these greater number of employees. More money is given to these employees to retain the good ones and to hire on new ones.
Capitalism.
This also means then that all these people then have more money to spend on more products, which again leads to the more products and services and businesses being offered to them. It's a great cycle.
Okay.
The big problem with any kind of boom like this is that eventually that boom is going to die. There does not exist a scenario in which the boom will be constant. Eventually, you're going to run out of things that people want. You're going to run out of products, and thus people will stop spending their money. Eventually, you're going to get to the maximum amount of employees and services that you're willing to offer, and you don't need to hire more people. Eventually, you are going to spend all the money you have, and thus cannot buy more things. Okay. So it's a mixture of it's a guessing game of trying to predict accurately when everybody has gotten what they need, when we need something new instead of just continuing to make the old things that we've always done. And that is, like I said, it's a guessing game. In the case of the Great Depression, grossly miscalculated. Basically, from the 20s, everybody thought that these things were going to continue. So everybody thought that there's always going to be new businesses. Cars thought, okay, everybody's going to need a new car. So the auto industry is booming. People are thinking that, oh, everybody's going to want to buy a new house. Companies are going to always want new office buildings. So construction is building more houses and more buildings than people are going to be needed after 10 years of the 20s.
Right.
And so when these all come into being by the end of the 20, and then one other thing, because of all this and because of the guarantee that, oh yeah, people are always going to be buying cars, people are always going to be buying houses, people are always going to have jobs, banks are giving away money like it ain't no thing because they know they are going to get a return on their investments from all these loans that they're handing out.
I mean, it's a reasonable assumption. I mean, there's so much prosperity.
Yeah. And one of the other things that the banks are doing, in addition to loaning money to the construction companies and to the car manufacturers and whatnot, well, they're also loaning money to private citizens who are wanting to invest that money in the stock market.
Okay.
Works out well for the bank because, again, the bank knows that it's going to get its money, and the bank gets more people make money and then put it into the bank. That also leads to the bank investing on its own and, again, making more money. But again, eventually, you got to the problem with everybody who wanted one had a car. They didn't need to buy a new one. They were happy with the one they purchased.
But I mean, what's eventually better than one car, but two cars?
Everybody had two cars. Everybody who wanted a car, like I said, everybody who wanted a car had the car they wanted, or rather, I should say, enough people. No, I'm going to go back. Everybody who could afford it, who had a car or who wanted a car, could afford it, bought the car and all the cars that they wanted, and they were happy.
Okay.
There was no need for them to buy a new one. To get another one rather than keep the one they had. Same thing for houses. People were happy with the houses they had. There was no reason to buy a new one. Companies, businesses had all the office space they needed. There was no reason for them to go and buy any more than they already had.
Okay.
But then as people stopped buying these things, like cars, like other latest convenience, when I say cars because cars was one of the big ones at the time, then when they stopped buying them, nobody knew that this is when people are going to stop buying them. It's that prediction, right? It's insanely hard to predict when customers are going to stop buying your product. If you've got virtually 10 years of people nonstop buying cars just as rapidly as they're being produced, then of course the company is going to continue to operate as if that is never going to end. But a prudent economist realizes that eventually that will end. You will get to some endpoint, and nobody was prepared for that endpoint coming. So I'm going to pick on the auto industry again. When they stopped being able to sell their cars because no one wanted to buy them, well, all of a sudden they're defaulting on a lot of their loans. This means they're going to start firing people. That means that a lot of people don't have jobs anymore, and then they can't pay for their loans, their houses, their conveniences or whatnot. So of course, other businesses then all across the country are going to stop selling because people no longer having the cash to just buy these luxury things. That
starts the cycle.
It's like a chain reaction. Yeah, it eventually spreads throughout everything. So going into the 20s, the big things without a doubt were construction, electricity, and cars. Those were the big things that all of a sudden were exploding all over the case. Construction because people needed new houses, new office buildings. Cars because everybody wanted to be able to go places. Like, to this day, a car is like the symbol of freedom. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then electricity with the explosion of lights and movie cameras and other technologies. All of a sudden, electricity needs to be everywhere.
Right.
But eventually we got to the point where we had everything we needed, or rather people had everything they wanted, but all the people producing these goods didn't see the end coming.
So my takeaway here is optimism is bad.
What?
I've been telling you this for years, and you just confirmed for me. I was right all along. Optimism only leads you into trouble. I feel justified in my pessimistic attitude now. Thank you, honey.
Your words hurt so much. Optimism is not a bad thing. Optimism is a perfectly
That's what got them into this. They were so optimistic.
No, not optimism. Optimism isn't what got them into this. Reckless optimism, maybe, but
all optimism is reckless optimism.
A lack of practicality, a lack of economic understanding is what got them into this.
Okay.
There's a difference between being optimistic that business is going to go well and just saying to yourself, oh, it's never going to end. Saying it's never going to end, that's not optimism. That's naivete.
Okay, then. So then the lesson here is cars and electricity and construction are bad. We should have been content. We should have been content with our log cabins and buggies and candlelight.
May the gods help me.
If we had all just been content with our little life on the prairie, then we would have never gotten into this Great Depression.
That is not what
Because the higher you go up, the higher you have to fall. So we should just... Are you crying?
I'm not crying. Are you done?
I'm done. I'll listen now.
Must control fist of death. Must control fist of death. I don't even know where to begin.
I don't even remember what point I interrupted you.
So, no, I am not saying that we should have stayed in the bygone days of the horse and buggy, the simple cottage, the farmer economy.
Mhm.
No.
Life would have been so much simpler, though.
And people would have still been more dead, though.
Less trouble.
Less trouble, less hygiene.
Well, that's true. I am a fan of hygiene and germ theory
I know you're a
and
fan of
medical
hygiene.
and medical advances.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see your point. We can't stay in the horse and buggy days.
So, no, yes, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it is so, and I want to be clear. I'm not trying to blame these people.
No.
I'm not saying that, oh, this is all your fault or whatnot.
No,
I'm
this is
saying
how
that,
it
no,
happened.
this is what happened. This is, like I said, this is a common thing that I dare say has happened throughout history. It's one of the hardest things about the economy and about business is, so most economic charts, if they're worth and if they're very good, there's always going to be like a curve. Too often, because it's easy when we look at charts, we see straight lines going up and down, sharp angles, changing direction.
Okay.
Curves are more likely, and if you the tricky part with these economic curves is recognizing, all right, when do you get to that point? What is that magic point at which the curve is going to hit its peak before it starts going down?
Okay.
If you can find what that magic point is, then yay, theoretically, you will be in business forever because you will always be producing exactly the number that is needed for you to sell and maintain a profit.
Okay.
If you go past that, then yeah, you're going to run into a problem. You're making too much of something, or something that you're never going to sell, or something that somebody's never going to buy. And especially if you took out a loan or something that any resources, anything that you spent making that one more thing that you need that you're not going to be able to sell, well, that's a loss to you. The more that you make over that line, the more loss it is to you. And if you don't know where that line is, and nobody can know for sure when that is, economists and businessmen have been trying since the dawn of time, I would imagine, to know where that point is.
Right.
Then yeah, certain companies are going to overcreate. And depending on what structures they have in place, they're not going to be able to endure the hit from that. In the case of the Great Depression, this was before there were a lot of bank securities and things of that nature. So when all these businesses and people start defaulting on their loans, stop spending the money, the banks, none of that money, this is one of the other problems that leads to the Great Depression. A lot of the money that was out there in the stock market technically didn't exist. The bank was loaning out money.
Cryptocurrency. It didn't exist. I didn't know Bitcoin was that old. Go on.
I have to recover. Remember that when the bank invests money, when the bank gives out loans and whatnot to people, the bank isn't giving you its money. The bank is giving you the people's money.
Right.
So when all these people who now don't have work anymore or need their money back so that they can pay their basic bills or whatnot, they go to the bank. This leads to what we call a bank run.
Right.
And banks usually don't have all the money that people have deposited in them right there ready to go in case people show up for it. Because after all, the banks have spent their money giving it out through loans, making investments on its own, things to that nature.
Like in Mary Poppins.
Yes,
there was a bank run in Mary Poppins.
That was a bank run. People want their money, and the banks don't have it. So this further compounds the economic problem. Back in those days, there were no laws that said that, the government, the FDIC today didn't exist back then. The FDIC, for those of you not aware, if a bank is robbed or if a bank loses your money because of bad, foolish practices, the federal government insures it so that you will get not necessarily all, but at least a good chunk of your money.
That's helpful.
There is a limit. I want to say it's like around $300,000, and that's probably the most that most people are actually going to have inside a bank.
Well, yeah, like your average person. Not
your average person isn't going to approach that limit. So yeah, this was before days like that.
Okay.
So there was nothing to make. There was nobody around, no authority rather, to tell the banks, hey, maybe we should cut back on all this money that we're giving out. There was not, or I should say, there was not listened to people, if not enough people, to tell the auto industry, hey, maybe we should stop making so many cars. I mean, eventually, everybody in the country is going to have a car, and nobody's
Right.
going to want to buy another one. Eventually, and the same thing in the construction industry. Nobody's saying that, hey, well, eventually everyone's going to have all the office space they need, and maybe we should cut back on this.
Okay.
So yeah, it was basically, we could look at the Great Depression then and say that, all right, so this was a great learning opportunity for economics, to not only the reminder that, yeah, okay, to assume that things are just going to go up and up and up, and there's never
Mhm.
going to be a point where, hey, we need to kind of cut back and be a little bit more conservative, to
Yeah.
recognize that there is going to be an eventual fall. No, everybody is just in a hurry to cash in, milk that cow, if you will, as fast as they
Mhm.
can, and hopefully get themselves out before the milk starts to sour.
Well, that was certainly a painful lesson.
It was for
It
an
did
awful lot of
not
people.
work out well.
So I want to be clear. We call it the Great Depression in the United States. Yeah, it was pretty bad. There were other. So this was a worldwide thing, though. This
Right.
affected countries throughout the world. A handful of countries managed it pretty well.
Okay.
But most of, at least when most of the westernized countries, so Europe and the United States and such, most of them did not handle it quite so well. Yeah, an awful lot of people lost everything. An awful lot of people ended up on the streets, homeless,
Yeah.
desperate for work. People, this was so bad. We have pictures of people selling their children, not like trying to sell them into slavery. I can see your eyes. You're already thinking about that. You're going to tease me about that next.
Nope. I mean, I'm not going to say I haven't thought about selling our children into slavery.
Oh my goodness. I thought this was supposed to be family friendly here, and here you are advocating child slavery.
We're talking about families.
Ugh. Anyway, going back,
selling their
we
children.
have pictures of that. They were trying to sell their children, not to make them slaves or whatnot, though supposedly that did, I shouldn't say supposedly, we know that did happen on more than a couple occasions. But the goal was to sell them to another family who would take care of them, who could offer them food, shelter, a place to stay. And yes, more often than not, those kids were probably put to work by their adopted parents or whatnot.
You'd have to be so desperate.
One of my favorite pictures that I have is there's 4 kids, cute kids, sitting on the stairs, and with a sign that says like 4 good children needing a good home or something like that. The mother is in the picture as well, or presumably it's the mother, and she's turned away from the camera. She's covering her face with her hand. And my guess, I could be interpreting the picture wrong, is my guess is that she was ashamed.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't blame her. I mean, to imagine the desperation that people get to want to need to do that, to consider that as even an option, terrifies me. We're strong family people. We love our kids. We believe in families and whatnot. And yeah, I cannot fathom the idea that we might ever get to that bad of an economic time. Terrifies me.
Right. I do have a question though.
Yes.
It's a serious question, I promise.
Yeah.
So
everyone who believes that, stand on their head.
So no, but did the Great Depression start in America and the other Western countries were affected because of their ties with us, or is there something larger going on?
Theoretically, you could say it started in America because that was the focus of the stock market, and the stock market crash is what we tend to
it's
use
like the big event
as the starting point. Yeah. So a lot of people say that was Black Friday. No, Black Friday is the sales day. Black Tuesday is the day because
Black Tuesday.
It was October 29th of 1929. Now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking, I might be remembering that date wrong. I'm pretty sure that was the date. I know it was a Tuesday. It's called Black Tuesday.
Okay.
So yeah, the stock market crash is what we typically use as the start of it, but certainly there were signs before that happened. Sales were down. Construction was down. Building of new power plants that goes along with construction. So surely people saw dips coming in before that happened.
So they had warning.
The market had no reason to crash until things started to dip. And and this is another one of the things where this kind of helps kind of assure the idea that we're probably not going to have this happen again, at least not quite as bad. Because one of the problems back during the Great Depression, no internet. no Wi-Fi, no
Yeah.
instantaneous records of what was going on in the world. Everything was still being operated by telegraph. So often enough during, like, especially that stock market crash,
Right.
the people that were on Wall Street that were making investments and whatnot, they were dealing with prices and information that was hours, if not maybe even days old at the
See,
time that they were trying to make their deals, which further contributed to the problem. We're
that's
probably not
so
going to have.
hard to imagine. Sorry, I'm interrupting. That is so hard to imagine. I know that's the truth, and I do remember being a kid before the internet was widespread, but it's so hard to imagine living like that anymore. Like things were just slower.
Mhm.
It blows my mind.
Well, you say slower, but this is actually one thing that I always love telling my students. All right, so you mentioned that where we grew up before computers and the internet were a popular thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love that not a lot of people recognize is that the printer
Mhm.
existed before the computer did. Edison.
I
Now, granted,
knew
there's probably some
that.
people that are going to pick on this. Edison is the one that gets credit, at least for inventing the
Yeah.
printer. But yeah,
Well,
when we're
he
talking
stole inventions, but go on.
when we're talking about the stock market and how investors were getting information that was
Yeah.
old, well, one of the most common thing that a lot of investors were using back then to keep up to date on the
Yeah.
stock market was telegram messages that went directly into printers.
Right.
Like you've probably seen in old movies or whatnot, like there's a guy standing next to what looks like kind of like a big snow globe-ish thing,
Yeah.
and he's pulling like
Like a
little strips of
thin
tape out of
strip.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the telegraphs. That is the first printer, a device which
That's
could
cute.
read electronic signals and print out messages that people could
Yeah.
read on it.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Okay, so anyways, you were saying, I interrupted you. So like they were getting the news about what was happening in the stock market crash and everything like hours old.
Hmm. So
That's
yeah,
weird.
because a lot of people were buying stuff from America or selling their stuff to America, and some countries were like, especially Germany, I know, was getting American loans to help its economy out after the First World War.
Uh-huh.
Then yeah, anything that happens in America is going to spread out and affect any country that did business with us, either
Right.
privately or publicly.
Right.
So off the top of my head, I remember that Italy weathered the Great Depression fairly well. But I'd say probably one of the more significant impacts that not too many people recognize or talk about is the connection between the Great Depression and allowing, and I mean this, allowing the
Mhm.
Nazis to come to power in Germany.
Really?
So one of the things that again, I love doing these things with my students because you can see their eyes just go
Yeah.
when they see this. So the Nazi Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, that's what the English translation would be
Right.
before they became known as the Nazis. So they started up in the early 20s, if I remember correctly,
Uh-huh.
and they weren't a big deal. I mean, they never really had all that much influence. Even after Hitler became their leader, they really weren't that popular. So Hitler doesn't really appear on too many people's radar until after what's known as the beer hall pushed, when he and a
Beer hall pushed?
yes, the beer hall pushed.
What's pushed mean?
I don't know in German. I always imagine it's like the coup or the rebellion or something like that. I've never actually looked it up.
Beer hall though. That's
But
weird.
yes, it was
Okay.
known as that because if I remember correctly, they met in a beer hall.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I would assume.
So anyway, that was a failed attempt by him to rebel. So that was a failed attempt by Hitler and the early Nazis to have a coup in Bavaria. Like I said,
Mhm.
it failed. Hitler goes to prison. Before he goes into prison, the Nazis had about 6% of the vote. 6% of people in Germany
That's not much.
identified themselves as Nazis. So yeah, that was not really enough to get any kind of good representation in the Reichstag, which was the
Okay.
German version of Congress at the time.
Okay.
While Hitler's in prison, he writes a book, Mein Kampf. Some people have probably heard of it.
No, I don't think I've ever heard of Mein Kampf.
But the sales for the book are bad. It's not that big of a
Okay.
seller. 2 years later, after Hitler does get out of prison, because he gets out of prison early,
Yeah.
the Nazis' political presence or power has dropped to about 3 or 4% of the
Holy
population.
cow.
And then in 1928, the popularity drops down all the way to about 2%.
That's basically dead.
2%. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nothing.
They're on their way out.
I think the Green Party and the Libertarians have a larger percentage of that in the United States today. I could
Huh.
be wrong on that. I've never looked at the numbers. But anyway, so there you can see that as time was going on, from 26 then to 20, or from 24 to then 26 to 28, the popularity of the Nazi Party is going down.
Right.
They were about to just disappear. It'd be another obscure party that the history would probably not even record ever existed.
Right.
Then the Great Depression happens. The year after the Great Depression, 1930, the next time that Germany is having elections, the Nazis have jumped up, if I remember the numbers correctly, to 14%
Holy cow.
political identity. 2 years later, they're up to over 30%.
Oh my
And if I
gosh.
remember correctly, but in 33, the year that Hitler basically ends up taking over,
Yeah.
in 33, they have up to 45% of the political vote.
Wow.
Still not a majority, but they had the largest political presence in Germany, in the populace, and in the Reichstag, the government. So any other political parties in play before Hitler eventually outlawed them all had to deal with the Nazis if they wanted to get anything done.
Wow.
And we know that that's entirely due to the Great Depression. People before the Great Depression saw Nazi propaganda and said, you know what? No, this isn't for us. We don't like it.
Right.
Peace out. After the Great Depression hits and people start to be poor and desperate, hungry, starving, looking for somebody to blame, looking for somebody to fix all their problems, suddenly the Nazi propaganda, people start eating it up.
Wow. That's not great.
No.
That's I've said this before, and I'm sure I will say it in every other episode too, but it doesn't cease to amaze me to contemplate like how different history would have gone with like one change. Like if there was some way we could have prevented the Great Depression from happening, would we not have had World War II? Would we have not have had the Holocaust?
Certainly possible, but we'll never know. I love contemplating about how history might be different, but it's so hard to have conversations about it because even the slightest little thing could have a drastically different matters. Like, I remember whenever I hear people talking about how don't go back in time and kill baby Hitler.
Yeah,
going back in time and killing baby Hitler probably doesn't stop the Great Depression from happening. Going back in time, killing baby Hitler probably doesn't stop the Nazis, or definitely doesn't stop the Nazis from existing. He was not a founding member. He joined later.
Which is something that I think most people don't think about.
And so we can't guarantee. So even though we know that Hitler was the great speaker, the charismatic guy, and definitely helped the Nazis come to popularity, we don't know that on its own, the Great Depression wouldn't have done sufficient to increase Nazi popularity.
Someone else would have stepped
Somebody
up.
else might have stepped in. And we don't know what that somebody else might have done as far as their plans for recovering Germany after World War I, or recovering Germany from how a lot of Germans believe that the country got shafted in the Treaty of Versailles.
Right. Crazy.
Yeah.
All right, we've talked for a long time.
We have. This has been a long episode.
Well, and the Great Depression, I'm sure you could teach many episodes.
Oh, there's so much more to do. When I usually I think the shortest lessons that I tend to have on the Great Depression involve a 2-hour period with my students, all a total of a 2-hour period. And that's assuming that they don't ask questions, which I love.
I love questions. Even my questions? You like my questions? I have good questions.
I like my students' questions.
I'm your student, so you love my questions.
I like serious questions.
I ask serious questions.
Seriously?
All right. Do you have any parting thing that you can't leave us without?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
You're the one that asked the question. So you tell me, did I answer your question?
No, I'm satisfied. So Cortis's question was...
Oh, that's right. This was his question.
Is it called the Great Depression because everyone was depressed?
People were depressed? Yes.
Many people were.
Why it was called it? No.
Okay. He'll be happy to know the answer. All right, we'll end it there then. Thank you all for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a 5-star review.
If you would like to hear a future episode with more information about today's topic, email us, send a message on Instagram.
And also, or send us a message.
Or send a
you
message
can do
on
both. And those, that contact information is going to be in the episode description. Also, please contact us if you have a silly question idea or if there's something from history that you would love to learn about.
Just be sure to specify in your message if it's silly or serious, because we don't want to treat a genuine quest for knowledge as a joke, like my wife does.
That's true. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So we're recording. Yes, that's how.
Are you sure? So that's
Okay.
what the timer means. That's not a
Every time.
countdown warning
No.
us that like we've got so many
No, it
seconds
isn't.
before the mic's on. It's on right now.
It's on right now.
Recording me asking the question.
Yes.
Are we sure about that?
Yes.
Because like, shouldn't there be like a red warning sign or
There
something
isn't.
and it's counting up, so that should be a clue also that okay,
Yes.
yeah, it's recording now instead of
Yes.
counting down to when we should start speaking.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. All right.
Okay.
So, are we starting?
If you shut up, I will do the script.
Well, that was kind of harsh.
It was. Ready?